Hello friends, it's been a minute. Let us not dilly, nor shall we dally. Today we're going to find out how this Firefly FFLPS Deluxe stacks up against the Gibson Les Paul Studio. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time to the channel. My name is Raj. Caveat, I have a speech impediment. I am going through cancer treatment, and so, I'll try my best to not sound like Shelly from South Park, but no guarantees. Like and subscribe and all that stuff. After a very short, decade-long delay, my account's finally been monetized, so I stand to make literally dozens of dollars a year if you subscribe. Today's video is not sponsored in any way. I did not receive free merchandise. I did not receive money. No one knows I'm doing this. I'm sure they don't care. I'm borrowing the Les Paul from my buddy Derek Barrett. Anyway, my opinions. Don't take it too seriously. What I'm trying to get at here is just a nuts and bolts comparison of a very affordable guitar to a guitar that's not quite as affordable, and to see which guitar is for what kind of player, maybe, and then give you my opinion. Don't get bent out of shape. We're all just making noise. It's gonna be fine. Okay, shirt number 2 of at least 3. A different day, and I just wanted to show you that I can be bougie too. I enjoy the bougie guitars as well as the budget-friendly guitars. I'm going to try to make this as concise as I can, the whole video, but if you're contemplating putting down money for this, I think I can offer maybe some insight. Some of that requires the speaking and the talking. So in a minute, I'm going to compare apples to apples as much as I can. I'm going to go from this guitar to the Gibson back and forth with the same settings. I'm going to compare the specs and the build and all that good stuff. But before that, I wanted to do kind of a mini review and look at this guitar in its own right and not necessarily as a comparison to a Gibson. I think there's some value in that. I'll try to go through it quickly. The one thing I would say up front is the only caveat that I have in trying to suggest the Firefly brand, because I own 4 of their guitars. They're all very good guitars for the money, but the specs change all the time on these guitars. The pickups, the hardware, the build, the cutaways. I've actually seen an FFLPS, same model on paper, with a carve, a full deep body carve to access the higher frets. Usually it tells you this on the site. When you click on a specific guitar, it will give you the correct specs, but as a model, whether it's a 338 or the FFLPS, there are a lot of things that change between guitars, and maybe it's just a question of when it was built exactly. But again, I don't know when this was built exactly. It could have been sitting in stock for a year. That's the only caveat I have. I think as a brand, it's a great value, and if you find something on their site that you like in terms of the look and the spec, in my experience so far with 4 purchased with my own money, it's been a winner every time. Does need a little work. I've said this on probably every video I've posted about budget-friendly guitars. It's a really good idea to go ahead and build in the cost of a fret job and a setup, or the time, if you do it yourself, to that cost. So $100, $150, whatever it might run you in your area. I build guitars. All the guitars behind me, for the most part, majority of them, have been my builds. So I did a fret level and recrown and polish of these frets And because I was comparing it to the Gibson, I tried to set the Gibson up very similarly as much as possible to where I have this one. When I got it, I did have one low fret, which is weird. I guess you could say many of the frets were high, but that didn't seem to be the case. It was very strange, actually, to have this happen, which was a real shame, actually, because everything else was fine, but I think it was fret 3 was much lower than everything else around it, and so it kind of required me to take some material off of everything to get back down to that level. Of course, these things are shipping from overseas, and changes in humidity and temperature and all that good stuff can affect the fretboard. That being said, 40 minutes, and I've got a fret job that fits my playing style perfectly, and I'm just going to move on from that. I think it's part of the built-in cost of buying a new guitar, regardless of how much you pay for it, really. Going from the headstock down, worst part of this guitar, bar none, tuners. They're not terrible, but compared to everything else, they do feel like maybe 1 or 2 steps behind. There have been significant hardware upgrades from the time I bought my original 338 Firefly to this. These tuners are far better than that 338's stock tuners were, but they still lack a little bit of precise gearing, I think. I think it's what's going on. It's just they feel fine in terms of smoothness, but there's a little play, and so it's dealable. If I was gigging this guitar a bunch, I would probably replace these, but as it stands, I'm going to leave them. They do tune up fine. It just takes a little more effort to get there. Mahogany neck, I'm going to guess it's a scarf joint, although I can't confirm that right now, but I am planning on stripping this neck down, something I would never do on the Les Paul because of the cost, but with my investment in this guitar, why not? That's what I like. So that will be happening. At that point, I will comment or change the description and let you know. But it is a mahogany neck, rosewood fingerboard. Nut is cut really well. I think maybe I ran a little sandpaper through there, but I didn't have to recut any of the slots. Truss rod was easy enough to move. No issues there. I think the neck is really comfortable. The specs are going to be in the next section, but I'm pretty malleable. I like, baseball necks. I don't really love super thin gym necks, but this sits on maybe the slightly chunkier side of normal. And I think they're probably trying to get the 59, kind of the average 59 thing down. But more on that when we compare it to the Gibson. The inlay work is all great. I really can't fault anything on any of the binding, aside from the slight difference in tint. So the binding on the neck, not the headstock, but the neck itself, is a little more white than the binding on the body and the headstock, which you probably can't even tell in this video. But it is a little bit, and man, that's nitpicky. That's so nitpicky, it's ridiculous. So whether or not you think that's a fault, that's the way it is. Perloid inlays or squares. I actually kind of prefer the inlays that are on my classic P90 Firefly, which are trapezoidal. But my guess is they had a Gibson they were trying to emulate, and that had the rectangle inlays. So there you go. Full-size pots, not CTS or anything fancy, but they are full-size pots in here. Maybe we're saying at this point that the Gibson, which is, 14 or 15 or something years old, has a 3-way switch that might need to be replaced at this point. Got some noise in it. Maybe some deoxit would work, but switches are switches. They cost, $10 for a good one. If it's working and it's not causing noise, and it gets full points for me. Pickups, I think, are great. Again, you'll hear the difference between the Gibsons, the 400 series Gibsons that are on that Les Paul, and this in a minute. But for me, not being a real heavy gain player, they do the humbucker thing well, and I don't hear anything weird about them. There's nothing too strange as far as the impedance and all that good stuff. So I would say they're not quite as sweet as the Gibsons, but again, you can be the judge of that. The bridge is actually kind of interesting. So it's a Tune-a-Mac bridge and stop tail, and from the look of it, it looks really plain, normal. And I'll say it's possible I have another guitar that I've never noticed this on. On this Tune-o-matic bridge, there is no floor beneath the saddles. So usually there's a stair-stepped ledge for the saddles to sit on, and there's still a floor to that. There's still material below the saddle. There's no material below the saddle on this. There might be some negative connotation with that in terms of like just the heft of the bridge or whatever, but it got me thinking. The number one problem I've had with budget Tune-o-matic bridges is that the floor beneath the saddle is too high, or there's some sort of burr or something, and the saddle actually hits that floor and does not sit on the ledge correctly, and there's a bit of a rattle or a pivot or tilt to the saddle piece, and this completely eliminates that potential, which is kind of brilliant. I don't know if that's why they did it, but suffice to say, bridge works great. Thumb wheels work like as they should. I had no problem getting it intonated, and yeah, it's pretty much right in the pocket as far as intonation and tuning are concerned. Stop tail's great. I've got it all the way down to the body. Might try to adjust that down the road just to see what the difference in feel is like, but I set it up that way to compare it to the Gibson, which is also set up that way. Again, full-size pots, not CTS, not name brand, but they are all working and doing the job. The tone control, and the input jack is actually a correct Les Paul style input jack. So some of these imports have kind of a cheaper telly style, I guess, for lack of a better descriptor, jack, and that makes a big difference in terms of gigging, especially because a lot of times that's the point of failure. The control covers are plastic. The back of the guitar, both body, neck, and headstock, it's completely opaque and black and looks nice. No finish flaws that I could find. Everything's kind of perfect. It's maddening as a guitar builder that they could do that at this price point. This is what they call the Cobra Burst finish. Very different than what Gibson calls a Cobra Burst finish, but it's a lovely finish nevertheless. The biggest difference that I can see between this and just a normal Sunburst Flame Maple top is that it's more of a gray fade on the edge, and it's lovely. It's just not really what Gibson calls a Cobra Burst, so I figured I'd point that out. Of course, that guitar is $6,500. I'm not sure how thick this veneer is. We're going to guess pretty thin, but it's solid. It looks great. Nice flame, and a little bit of other figuring in there as well, which is kind of nice, and probably just kind of a luck of the draw thing. Overall, I think it's a great guitar, not just for the money, but in its own right. If you're looking for a Les Paul style guitar and don't want to spend $1,500 or more, my opinion is that from what I've played, this is every bit as good, if not better, than some of the more high-end Epiphone guitars, which, you know, aren't terribly cheap. And if you figure in the price of a good setup, I think it's really hard to go wrong in terms of money spent. Now, a more saucy part of this very subjective review, which is, why on earth would somebody buy a Gibson? A lot of reasons. First of all, there's a history there, right? There's a very deep history with Gibson guitars, the same way there is with Fender, even more so, and there's something to be said for that. And if you have the money, it's not a concern for you. If you have any sort of collector part of your person where that speaks to you in some way, then obviously the Gibson's going to be much more desirable than Firefly or any other kind of import guitar for that matter. I think that's perfectly valid. Again, I'm wearing a Novo shirt. There's something to be said for made in USA. There's something to be said for the fact that known craftsmen and builders have had their hands on it. I think that's all valid. And this video, my channel as a whole, not meant to invalidate that point of view. However, I am a working musician, have been for my entire adult life. And while I have a few cherished higher-end guitars, aside from the ones that I build myself, a lot of my guitars are more budget-friendly than not. And the reason being is practical. It's a fully practical reason. I needed to bring these guitars on the road, on a plane, on a bus, in a van, on some crappy trailer. And I'm not going to do that with a $6,000 Cobra Burst Gibson. Just never. No matter how much the gig is paying, right? That entire discussion is beyond the scope of a review or a comparison of a budget guitar. If you're watching this, my guess is, again, you're probably interested in this guitar or this company as a whole, and you're just trying to get some insight. And so that's where I'll leave it. There's always comments on these videos about, well, I'm only going to buy it if it's USA. Well, the fact of the matter is there are a lot of folks here in the US who made part of their daily wage handling this guitar, whether it was somebody on the dock or somebody in logistics or somebody that worked at this company's office in California. In my opinion, it's not a black and white discussion. There's a very deep discussion there, and it's not cut and dry, and it's way beyond the scope of somebody's comments on YouTube or this video or, the internet as a whole. Your mileage may vary. Don't do something you're not comfortable with. But all that being said, this is a really good guitar. All right, new day, new shirt. I'm going to go through some facts and figures, some numbers, some materials, some things that are less subjective, more objective to compare these two. So, first of all, where were they made? The Firefly was made in, very likely, Weifang Zhejiang Musical Instrument Company in the Weifang region of China, and the Les Paul was made at Gibson in Nashville, Tennessee, USA. Date of manufacturer, I don't know for sure on the Firefly. There's nothing to indicate when it was made. I'm going to guess sometime between 2022 and 2023. The Les Paul was made on Thursday, March 29th, 2007. Getting into the construction of the instruments, the Firefly has a carved mahogany body with a flame maple top. The Les Paul has a carved mahogany body, no top on that one. The necks are both mahogany. The Firefly has a rosewood fingerboard, and the Les Paul has an ebony fingerboard. The Firefly is fully bound, neck and body, and the Les Paul has no binding on the studio models. The hardware on both is gold-plated, although I will say there's a little bit of a discrepancy as far as what I was able to find on the Les Paul. The serial number would indicate that this model had chrome-plated hardware. But I've spoken with Derek, and the only thing replaced on this guitar were the tuners. And they're Gibson tuners, so they're the same model that came with the guitar. I think possibly those were not gold-plated, and he wanted everything to match. So that's just a guess, but they are Gibson. They are the same greenish tulip tuner that came on this model. Both of these guitars have a Tune-O-Matic style bridge, pretty similar. I had to flip around some of the saddles to get the intonation correct on the Firefly. The profiles of these necks are not completely dissimilar. The Firefly at the first fret is about 0.93 inches, and at the 12th fret is about 1 inch, whereas on the Les Paul we've got 0.87 inches at the first fret and about 1 inch at the 12th fret as well. Speaking of frets, I'm not sure what the Les Paul has. I couldn't find the spec. The Firefly has stainless steel frets. Nothing too dissimilar there in terms of size. Both guitars are at the Gibson scale, 24.75 inches. I measured the break angle at the headstock. To the best of my measuring ability, the Les Paul's break angle is 16.5. It's supposed to be 17. I kept on coming up with 16.5. It's wood. There's definitely some room for things to move, I suppose. The Firefly is 14 degrees, and actually there were Gibsons that were 14 degrees for quite a while before they went back to 17 degrees, so I guess it's possible that you have a Les Paul that is at the same headstock angle as the Firefly. The neck angle off the body is 4 degrees on both guitars to the best of my measuring abilities. Both guitars have the standard Les Paul controls, 1 3-way switch, 2 volume knobs, 2 tone knobs. The Firefly weighs in at 8.6 pounds, and the Les Paul weighs in at 7.83 pounds. Radius on both guitars is 12 inches. I measured the impedance of all the pickups through the jack. So on the Firefly, the neck measured at 8.33 14.8K. The bridge was at 14.59K. On the Les Paul, we were at 7.62K on the neck and 13.56K on the bridge. I am pretty certain that the neck pickup on the Les Paul is a 490R and the bridge is a 498T. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope that this was of some help to anyone that's looking at a Firefly or a Les Paul for that matter. Can't go wrong either way, in my opinion. It depends on what's important to you. If it's just a question of crunching the numbers and watching the pennies, or if you want something that's going to be more of an heirloom or a piece of American musical manufacturing history. There are, of course, some other differences that I didn't get into. One is the volute on the Firefly. There's a bit of a volute on the neck, almost none at all on the Les Paul. My guess is that's changed somewhat on the Gibsons throughout the years. It definitely has changed on the Fireflies, even in the short time they've been in business. So, it doesn't really affect the playability, doesn't affect in use, might affect the degree of which one will withstand a fall in a gig bag, but can't cover everything in a 25 or so minute long video. So thanks again. If you have any questions, ask them below and I will try to get to them. Thanks. Bye.